So, in the past week, I've been talking a lot about DPS and tanks, and I think it's kind of been sounding like I've been saying that no, you should never play support because there's just other options that generally seem better on paper. But honestly, today, I want to talk about why becoming a support main and being a support main can also be a great way to climb in its own right, and why, especially if you're a support main that goes on Zenyatta or Lucio or Moira, it can actually be one of the better ways to climb other than, I guess becoming the best DPS in the entire game. With all that said though, guys, let's get started. Now, the first thing I want to begin with right here is that playing support, I feel like there are two main type of players. There's the ones that are just playing because they want to fill, they're playing with their team, they're doing whatever, just kind of going with the flow, and that's fine. You're probably going to stay at your current elo. But there's also the ones that are really trying to win that game, putting in a lot of effort and trying to improve themselves the most that they can. I honestly gotta say, I don't see these way too often, but that's kind of what you have to do if you obviously want to rank up as a support. A lot of the other roles, tank and DPS, think about this a lot, but I think support, there's a decent amount of players that just say, hey, if I'm playing the role, I should be able to rank up. That's not kind of how it works. You still will have to put in a lot of time, a lot of effort, you still have to just put in a lot of everything. But if you do that, I think support does have a lot of good things about it that can help you kind of climb in the long run with it. And the first thing I'm going to say for support is that they can do a lot more than you think they can, especially the off supports again, like Zenyatta and Lucio. I'm going to be mentioning those guys a lot. They can get more kills than you'd really think on paper, or they can get more damage than you'd think. They can really get a lot more advantage for your team than you'd think. And I think a really good example of this is Jonak whenever you watch him play in the Overwatch League. He is the Zenyatta that is amazing at getting those alternate fire kills. It seems like the Overwatch development team even nerfed Zenyatta just because Jonak was so good at getting kills. And, I mean, if he can do it, you can kind of do that too. And I think that is just a good example to see, yeah, supports can have impact. And as well, when we look at support win rates and high elo, they're all super high. They're all doing a lot for their team. And, it doesn't really matter who you're playing, except for Ana, I guess, right now. But everyone else really can help their team out in ways that just other roles can't. And I think the first way that you're kind of helping your team out that I think is very important to keep in mind is that you are making a better team comp for the most part. Now, sometimes you will find two other support mains. That does happen sometimes, but I think generally you are almost always inherently making your team, as far as rolling the dice goes, better than the enemy's team. If you have one support main on your team compared to the possibility of 0 support mains on the other team, well, generally that's pretty good for you, and I think that's a good reason to play support. You can play in almost every single game the character that you want to play, and even if you want a one trick like again Zenyatta, Lucio, Moira, even Ana or Mercy, you almost always can. And that's how I think we see so many supports with so much hours on their characters. They're kind of allowed to do it, which a lot of the other roles, if they aren't being scumbags, aren't really, and I think that is a great thing about it. And I guess something to continue with that is that support really gives you a lot of time to practice with not only your character, which is great and everyone wants to do that, but practice with pretty good team comps as well. With a lot of other characters, especially with me playing Reaper, I'll get in and about half of the time I'll get triple DPS, which still is playable, especially on certain maps. I mean, on some maps it's just terrible, but some maps it's playable. I can still practice, still try to do my best, and a lot of the times the enemy team has 3 DPS, so it's not too bad either. But if I'm playing support this day, let's say I want to play Lucio only this day, which sometimes happens, well, most time I'm getting the character I want. I get a lot of time on that character, and I can really think about what I'm doing and practicing him instead of just thinking, what am I even supposed to do? This is a terrible team comp. There's nothing to learn from this game. Because that is a lot of the time what I'll do when I'm playing DPS. But again, support, it doesn't really have that problem, at least for me, nearly as much as some of the other problems. Now, I guess sometimes, again, you might not get your role, and it might be kind of hard to switch from support to other roles, but for the most part, that shouldn't be too much of a problem, and really that should be a great reason to pick it up to try to climb in the long run. And I should say that really playing support is all about the long run. I don't think they can hard carry every single game. That should be pretty obvious, but they can affect games extremely potently. And if you play enough games with a potent addition added to your team, you should in the long run, again, be able to climb pretty well. Maybe even better than a main tank who might have problems not being able to get way too much effect into the game. You as a support really can do a lot for your team, which I think is kind of nice about them. Now, switching to a different topic about support, I'm going to say that there aren't way too many try-hard support mains. I mean, again, there are some, and I will see them now and then. But again, at least from my experience, a lot of them that are playing support are just kind of playing the role because it's fun, because, you know, their friends want them to play that role. There's a lot of different reasons. But if you are a support main that's actually try-harding, you're trying to get the best aim you can, you're trying to get the most mechanics you can, the best damage you can get out, get kills by yourself, or at least really help your team to get kills. Well, if you're doing all of that, plus of course your normal healing, and plus of course your normal keeping your team up and keeping them alive and safe, then you're going to do amazing. And honestly, you're going to outperform the majority of other support players. And with other roles, that isn't always the case. With tank, I guess it depends on the character. Sometimes people try a little bit more on some characters than others. But with DPS, I think it's kind of the opposite. With DPS, everybody's trying their hardest to improve their mechanics, to focus on themselves, to try to hard carry that game. And it can be really hard to get into that and really hard to show that you're better than anyone else. But with support, I think even DSP Stanky, even though he's gone forever, he was a really good example. You could go in, you could show off what you're great at, get kills, and do some stuff. As long, you know, as well as playing with your team and keeping them up and doing all of that. And I think that is a good benefit about this. And another benefit, I guess, that connects directly to that is that if you do kind of mess up as support, as long as you don't run up and feed and kill yourself, but if you miss a lot of shots, or if you just aren't getting the most damage boost to the correct target at the correct time always, well, it usually isn't too bad, and your team can usually still do okay, and usually you'd still have around a 50% chance to win or lose that game. But if you're doing great that game, well, that's all the better. You're probably upping your chance to a 60 or 65% win rate, or 65% chance to win that game. And that's all the better for yourself. And that's another thing that I think is really good about support, is that you don't always have to just pop off and carry every single game. You can have times where maybe you're making a decent amount of mistakes, but you can still win that game. And of course, that's not what you want to do, of course. You want to be doing your best. You want to be carrying every single game. But it's kind of nice to know that if you make a few mistakes as your role, you aren't going to be completely raged at instantly. I guess if you hate being raged at as well, playing support could be pretty good because it doesn't happen too much as far as the off-healers go. But yeah, I think that is another benefit about playing this role that can be a great reason to pick it up. Now, for these final two reasons I'm going to talk about, they aren't really about the characters themselves, but more about the role and kind of how it plays. And the first thing I'm going to mention right here is that generally as support, you have a little bit more time to herd around your team. You generally have a better angle to look at your team, to look at the enemy team, to see what's going on. Sometimes you have more high ground than your team. Sometimes you can jump around walls as Lucio, or you can stay pretty high up as Zenyatta. There's a lot of stuff you can do, and you generally play pretty far back so you can see where everyone is. So you can herd your team around like cattle a lot easier as this role. And if you're somebody that's playing the role already, but you aren't trying to shot call what to do, where to go, when to do it, I'd really recommend to try to do that, because it works for every single role. It's great for every single role. But sometimes when you're playing DPS, or when you're playing a frontline, well, I guess frontline DPS or a frontline tank, it can be kind of hard to know exactly what your teammates are close to. I mean, whenever I'm playing Reaper again, I just kind of shot call, hey, I'm going after this person in the back line, and hope that people kind of help. But as a support player, when you have a better overall vision of the game, you can make a lot better callouts. And in general, when I see supports making out great callouts, I'll listen to them and I'll try to follow them. Of course, this does, I guess, only apply to you if you have a mic. But I mean, if you don't have a mic, you should probably do that as well if you want to climb. But yeah, especially as support though, I think that's a great thing. And the final thing about support in particular that I think is honestly one of the best parts about climbing and competitive, and as well, I guess, about finding some friends in here, is that if you are a support player or become one or whatever, you become the perfect duo queue partner. And personally, whenever I'm just playing DPS for a season, I try to add every single support I can find, because they don't show up way too much. And a lot of the times I'll just get people filling support, and those aren't the best. So if I can find someone that actually plays support, I'll add them and hope that they add me back. Now, of course, it doesn't happen every single time, but honestly, you are opening up a lot of potential people to play with you. And as well, you are giving yourself a good chance to play with some good players. I guess you could call that boosting yourself. I don't know. But I think that is something that honestly we can't overlook as far as looking at the system. And if you yourself are a great support player, I'd honestly recommend to add every great DPS you find, every great tank you find. And if you're doing pretty good every single game, they might want to actually add you back and play with you, because for their roles as well, they would like to have more supports on their team, because I guess it increases their chance of having, you know, a better team comp and not having just 3 DPS every single game. So I guess kind of keep that in mind, and keep in mind that even though I guess you didn't pick this role for this exact purpose, that is kind of a side benefit that you should be trying to utilize the best that you can. It is a very strong side benefit, and it's something that you see a lot of supports doing to climb. A lot of supports don't do this, and I guess if you're completely against playing with other players like that, then that's fine, but it is a thing to think about when you're deciding to pick up this role or not, if you really want to find other people to try to play with. But anyways, as always, guys, that's just been my own opinion about supports and why I think it's a pretty good idea to pick up this role to climb. Now, I will restate, as I said in like my last video, I wouldn't really say that you should fill a support and you should be someone that plays every single role and just kind of go support sometimes. I think if you do that, you're just going to kind of stay the same rank forever. But as far as going full-on maining support this season, I think that can be a great idea, and I'd honestly recommend it because I've seen a lot of big results with this. And every single elo needs a lot of support players. The top elos are kind of running out, so honestly, that would be kind of nice. Anyways, as always, guys, though, thank you all for watching. Hope you enjoyed. If you did, make sure to leave a like. Comment down below if you have your own opinions, or hit that subscribe button to see videos like this in the future. As always, guys, have a wonderful day.